portfolio, and I'm excited to introduce our guest, Matt Bilotti. Matt is currently a product lead at AngelList and was employee number 6 at Drift, which sold for $1.2 billion in 2021. During his time at Drift, Matt wore basically every hat in product management, sales, customer success, marketing, and engineering. He is also a very active investor and advisor. He was the managing partner of the first dorm room fund in Boston and has invested in over 60 startups. On top of all of this, Matt also ran a very successful podcast called Growth with Matt Bilotti, which has over 100,000 downloads. He is a treasure trove of startup and career wisdom, and we are delighted to have him with us today. Matt, we're going to try to cover as many things as possible, cover lots of ground, but let's start with the early days. Can you tell us about teenage Matt? Were you similarly driven and multifaceted as a high school student and college student?
Well, thanks for having me. It's a very nice intro. I would say teenage Matt, not really. Teenage Matt sort of like coasted through classes wherever I could and didn't really try very hard. But I got very lucky because we had a business program in my high school, and I took those classes, and I realized I really enjoyed that type of work. It was like there was one was a marketing class, and then I joined like a business organization. We had a thing called DECA. And FBLA, Future Business Leaders of America, and joining those were the things that kind of like sparked my multifacetedness and like gave me stuff to care about besides like sports and video games.
So it's safe to say you were also though interested in sports and video games. Is that right?
Very interested in sports and video games. Did not have like big plans. I never said I was gonna be like an advisor. I always or an investor or whatnot. I always just kind of like knew I wanted to start my own business one day. But early on, high school me and earlier thought that meant like opening a Red Lobster one day. Um, I've evolved since.
Fair, fair, fair. Yeah. I feel like you and I are similar age. So I feel like entrepreneurship to me meant like, yeah, like um I don't know, yeah, like starting a chain
Yeah,
restaurant or
yeah,
something. It wasn't
franchise
like
or something like that.
yeah, it wasn't like starting a new company. Whereas I feel like today students think entrepreneurship is starting a tech company that's like worth $1 billion in 5 years or something like that,
Yeah,
which is
it's
awesome. I
awesome.
love that it's so inspiring. Okay, so what motivated you then? Because I mean, you've gone on to achieve a lot of great things, and I imagine in high school you probably were also similarly competitive. Is that fair to say? So, if you were reflective of your teenage self, do you remember what motivated you?
Yeah, very competitive. Always have been competitive. Um, I grew up playing games, like all sorts of games, card games, whatnot, with family, and it was very cutthroat. Like no one would ever let me win, like that sort of thing. And so it was very much like I've tried to find ways to win stuff. Um, and then I think I had, my motivations have shifted over the years, but I sort of had this picture, high school me had this picture of like one day, like I wanted to do something that mattered. I wanted to like make a name for myself, that sort of thing. And I also at the time I struggled with like social anxiety pretty badly. And I went to it was some sort of talk, and there was a guy a couple years older, maybe he was in college, and he recommended a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I read it, and I basically treated it like a Bible. Like I'd read a chapter, I would live the chapter for a month, and then I would, read the next chapter, and like that sort of motivated me to like like try to make sense of how I can do more. And when I got to college, it was very much like, all right, I want to do stuff now, and I went to they had like not a career fair, but like a organizations fair, like all the clubs on campus and whatnot. And I stumbled across the entrepreneurs club table, and they seemed to be the most interesting, and like startups were just becoming a thing, like social network, that sort of world. Facebook was getting really big, and so I kind of like that led to one thing and another and a mentor and then getting involved, and yeah.
Yeah, can you tell us about this organization? Like what did they do? What was like how did you contribute? What did they do on campus and how did it shape who you are today?
Yeah. So the Entrepreneurs Club had weekly, every Tuesday, they had a speaker that was like a founder or a CEO. Um, and we got some big names. Like it was always surprising how cool the people were that showed up. Like we had the CEO of Wayfair, we had the CEO of Aubon Pen. Like we had some like a CEO of Legal Seafoods came and talked to us. A CEO of Kayak. Like we got some really cool people, and just being around that and being around like these folks that have built things that were meaningful and were known, and we got to just hear their insights. And to them, like, I reflect back on them. To them, they were just like showing up to a bunch of college kids and threw up some slides, and it was a good time for them. And also for them, it was like a prime, like, they're finding their next intern sort of thing too. But going to those every week exposed me to a lot of like what it looked like to be involved in startups. And then we also had a ton of other programs. Like we had a Husky Startup Challenge, which was like a month long, every weekend sort of thing, where you're like building a business. And we had another that did like coding boot camps. And so the club had just had a lot to offer. And so it was sort of like there was a point we always had free pizza. There was a point where like 6 out of 7 meals a day, or 6 out of 7 meals a week, were pizza. Like my dinners were pizza. Um, 6 out of 7 days a week, because I would just like go to an event. We had something going on. So it was that plus the community. It was just a lot, like some of the smartest people that I ever came across at Northeastern, was the school I went to. And some of the most interesting people were involved in that group. And so it became this magnet for awesome people. And I just like, loved being engaged with them. And yeah, I did like my very first thing that I did for the club was I did surveys. So I like printed out these paper surveys. It was like, how would you rate this meeting? Any feedback for us? What? And I'd put those out on the tables, and I did that after every Tuesday speaker event we had, and like that was just like the first thing I did. And then after that, it was like, all right, I did more marketing stuff. I ran the Facebook events. I did all that. So
Awesome. I feel like yeah, student organizations that are focused around entrepreneurship and like in itself it is like a sort of like a company, it's an organization, right?
yeah.
You try to like drive growth and engagement and yeah, that's awesome. Good learnings there. Are you still close with the folks that were in that student organization? Does it still exist?
Yeah, it still exists. A lot of it's funny. I have. I'm counting it for the first time now. I've invested in 3 companies that were founded by presidents that came after me, like presidents of the Entrepreneurs Club that came after me. And so over the years, I've sort of always been close and can help wherever I can. I'm like very removed from it now just because it's been so many years out. But if they were to anywhere, one were to reach out, I'd be happy to help them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, we had the same thing at our school, and it was called Empowered Entrepreneurship. And honestly, same thing. It's like pitch competition, hackathons, etc. And yeah, we're all still friends, and a lot of us started companies, and yeah, it's great. College in that way can be really formative, which is cool.
Yes.
So you mentioned you went to Northeastern, which has an incredible co-op program, which is renowned today as well. Can you tell us about your first job that you had in college?
Yeah, so funny enough, I tried to convince the university to let me make being president of the Entrepreneurs Club my co-op. And I went on this whole campaign to make it happen. Pitched it to a bunch of, advisors and folks. I got a big no. They were like, "No, that's not a real job. Like, go get a real co-op." And so, what I did was because I ended up being really late in the cycle. So you're like supposed to lock in your co-op like 6 months before the co-op cycle. Um, and I didn't do that because I was trying to make my own. And so it was kind of last minute. I only had like 4 weeks to turn it around. And I reached out to the guy that was the president of the Entrepreneurs Club before me. He had just graduated and he joined a really early stage startup. as a COO, and I reached out to him and I said like, hey, I need to do a co-op. Like, do you guys have anything where I can help? And he said, yeah, we're actually trying to build this software thing, and we need a product manager. Like, you might be good at it. Do you want to try it? And I remember Googling like product manager, like what is that? And then I just sort of said sure, and then yeah, it was. I mean, the startup was a bunch of kids. Like no one was older than like 25. Like we really didn't know much of what we were doing, but it was a ton of fun. And I learned a ton, and it was kind of like this like playground where we got to just like make mistakes and try stuff out and learn things. So that was my first like official co-op role. Um, yeah.
Yes. And what happened to the company? Did it grow? Did you follow it?
Uh, I I actually took a leave of absence from school because I was like, all right, this is gonna be like the next big thing. 3 months later, the whole thing imploded. I ended up going back to school, obviously, and very glad that I did. And yeah, the it's sort of like I said, we were a bunch of kids. We didn't really know what we were doing. Like we were like a marketing agency, and we had some contracts to like set up booths and hand out Arizona iced teas to get email addresses of students on campuses, and we get paid from the companies to do that. And so like we had some revenue, but we never really built a business model. And on the software side, like none of us knew what we were doing. We didn't. I mean, there were so many mistakes that we made around like how to build software and how to validate that the thing that you're building is actually gonna work, and that the business model is functional. A lot of those things. So the whole thing fell apart spectacularly, but it was fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome for you to be able to learn it in a like sort of low risk way, right?
Yes.
And then take those learnings on to your next thing. So speaking of your next thing, how many, well, actually, maybe I should ask, how many co-ops did you do?
I did three. So
Three. That's
Northeastern, yeah,
awesome.
three co-ops over. At the time, it was a 5 year program. You do three co-ops. Now I think the default is 4 years for every student, but I think it's still three co-ops. It's either two or three. I don't know.
Wow, that's great. And is it like the co-op has to be a certain duration and a certain number of hours?
Yeah, they have to be 6 months. I think that there's some certain majors have exceptions where like certain ones can only be 4 months just because the way that the industry works. Um, but yeah, it literally full like you're not taking classes, like you are full time doing that. And so my second one actually, uh, so that company collapsed. I went back to school. I was trying to like refigure myself out because I like put my entire like personality into that company, and like that was who I was. And so I was in shambles and trying to figure out what I wanted to do and like how I was gonna like rebuild my brand and whatnot. Um, and I over during that time of my first co-op, I went to an event in Boston that was it was like a startup community event, and there was a guy there that was a VP of product at HubSpot at the time, and he gave a talk, and I just thought he was super smart. I loved what he had to say, and it was like kind of about product management, but it was also about startup stuff in general. And so like I was a product manager now, and like I was in startups and I didn't know what I was doing. And so I went up to him after that after his talk, and I had asked him if I can like if he could be a mentor to me, if I could send him questions as I have them, because like I said, I had no real manager. I mean, my manager was my friend, and he was 22 at the time, and so like no one really knew what they were doing. And so I sort of like I made him adopt me as as a mentor. And so during that first co-op, every few weeks I would come across something where I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And so I'd like write him a whole email. I'd be like, here's what's going on. Here's my challenges. Like, am I thinking about this the right way? Like, what's going on here? Like, what would you do? And he would always give me really really thoughtful responses, and so he was a really good mentor for me during that era. And then when I was like back in the like rebuild, what am I going to do now sort of thing, I just reached out to him and was like, hey, like I'm good, like I would love to do some stuff on the side while I'm in classes, like do you have anything that could be interesting? And he said, yeah, like come in tomorrow, like let's talk. We actually need some help. And I like joined as an intern, doing, I don't know, 20, 30 hours a week on the side. It was a lot of hours. I mean, when you're a college student, you could just do that amount of hours. Um, and I was basically just doing like customer support, and it wasn't anything fancy, but it was working at a cool company. It was a team. It was him, and then it was me, and it was three engineers that had been acquired in, or four engineers that had been acquired in from other companies, and we were trying to build. HubSpot had only done marketing software, and we were trying to build sales software. And so like our team was the team building the sales software. So I was just like, sure, I'll be a part of this. Like, it's like a little VC backed startup within HubSpot. And then that ended up becoming all the sales products that they have today. And so I did that part time while in classes, 20, 30 hours a week for 6 months. And then I turned that into my next co op. And then I just stayed after the co op ended. I stayed on as an intern for another like 20, 30 hours a week after that.
How did you know? Well, maybe we'll back up on like finding mentors. Were you intentionally trying to find a mentor at the time you'd already like known that mentors are super helpful? Or were you just like enamored by this guy and were like, I just feel like I can learn from him and like it all worked out?
Yeah, mostly just sort of enamored. I the thing that, like, as I look back and I think about like my first co-op and my second co-op and then even my third, like my role out of school. We'll talk about Drift in a little bit. Like all of that through almost all my 20s, all my decision making of like what was I gonna do as a co-op or an internship or a job, it was all just following like who do I think is really smart? Like where do the smart people congregate? And when it started, it was the Entrepreneurs Club. Like that was like the smart, interesting community where those people congregated. And then it was, okay, let me join this other startup where my smart friend that just graduated joined. And then it was, let me join HubSpot where this, and it was sort of like my calculation was just who do I feel like I can learn the most from. I didn't care like what the company was doing. Like I didn't even really know HubSpot did marketing software at the time when I joined. Like I didn't like there was no like planning of industry or like focus or like role either. It was literally just like who is smart and is there something I can help them with where I feel like I might be able to learn.
Do you feel that same way about AngelList? I know we're jumping
Yeah.
pretty far down, but is that the same strategy? Just always surround yourself by the smartest people. It doesn't matter really what the product or like the problem space is.
I think it has shifted for me now. So I think, like I said, all my 20s was very much about just like, where can I learn the most from the people that I feel like I can level up the most from? And then um, after Drift, the calculation shifted to be a little bit more selfish of like, what do I want to learn about? Like, what do I want to do? And what type of industry do I want to work in? The people being smart and interesting was still like a non-negotiable for me. But it was a little bit more of like, let me try to pick the place and the industry where I want to like spend the next 10 to 15 years. And so that was the thought process with AngelList.
Okay, that makes sense. And I mean, given your intro and investing and startup, it's like AngelList is perfect for you, so that's great.
Exactly.
All right, so you already explained how you ended up in your first role out of college. Well, okay, so maybe tying your college experience in the entrepreneurship club and working at startups, and then having so many roles, you have all of the skills and knowledge, not all of it, but like you have a lot of skills and knowledge to start a company. Is that something you plan to do one day, or have you decided like it's not for you, you're an incredible advisor, and that's where you want to be?
Yeah. Thanks for the advisor note. I had always told myself I was going to start a company. It was like the thing that my brand was built on in college. It was like, I'm running the entrepreneurs club, I'm doing entrepreneurship stuff, like I'm doing dorm room fun, like of course I'm going to start my own company. And I tried a couple things, right, like as I was heading out of college, and none of them really panned out. And so to me, the decision I had to make was like, all right, well, if I don't want to, there's nothing here that I want to actually pursue. And so what's the next best thing? And it was, okay, well, the next best thing is to join a really early stage startup and learn what it takes to build a startup so that I have the tools and skills to do that myself. And so that was why I joined Drift out of school. It was two co-founders that had built and sold four companies together, and like they were the guys in Boston to sort of join that journey for. And and after going through that whole thing from zero in revenue to the billion-dollar exit over almost 7 years, like it's hard. It's so hard. Building a startup is so hard. You have to be kind of psychopathic to do it. Um, and I think I'm not ruling it out, but I am a little bit less interested in it as like the must do default sort of thing. I think I'm a little bit more likely to start my own like venture capital investing type thing than I am a like classic startup.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're gonna dive into the hard now, I guess. So let's talk about Drift. You joined as employee number six, and it was pre-revenue and it sold for 1.2 billion in 2021. Can you just start us off with an overview of some of Drift's key milestones between each funding round?
Yeah. So um, one thing about the drift journey is if you know anything about it, and even you explain like we exited for the $1 billion, like the story of that type of startup often is told as like we had this really special insight and we realized that the world could be better if we built XYZ, and we sort of followed that, and that's what got us to where we were. Drift spent about a year and a half, almost 2 years, just sort of like doing a bunch of random stuff. Like Drift started as an employee NPS tool, and then it was this note-taking app, and then it was a screenshotting tool, and then it was a better version of Zendesk, like an email support inbox, and then it was in-app notifications, and then it was chat, like live chat on your website, and then it was like we went through so many different versions of like what is the thing that is gonna be a business. um, and so like the milestones early were just like keep trying stuff, and the business pivoted like different model, different customer, different entire different product. It was like every 3 months or so. And it was just this like really aggressive version of trying stuff. And then after almost 2 years of that, we had one product launch, which was a chatbot that booked meetings for sales team members. And like that was the one where things felt different. Like people were signing up, we didn't know them, we weren't convincing them of anything. Like there was a lot of buzz in the market, things that we were like pushing to the market around our, you know, like our content and whatnot was like striking a nerve. We were building a community, and that was when we sort of realized we had something, and we got that to about $1 million in revenue, and that was like okay, like we figured something out. And then we raised off that, and then got to $6 million the next year, and it was kind of just like how do we keep ratcheting it up from there. And then after the 6 million mark, it was like we kept growing in really fast chunks, and the fundraise kind of just like came off the side of that, and less so of like we need to raise. It was more of like no, we should raise to like accelerate this.
Okay, so it sounds like well, I don't want to like make you repeat things, but in a previous let's see, in another episode that I watched of you, you're talking about how like every month you'd basically like send out marketing about a concept that you had. You'd see if people signed up naturally, and if they did, you'd pursue it and then you'd build it. Like it was very like market driven first.
Yeah.
So I guess once you hit this bot that would schedule sales calls and you got to 1 million ARR, how did you think about evolving beyond that? So how did you get to the 6 million and then eventually the, much more?
Yeah, it was all about like that's where we sort of like had to take a step back and look at the like in that very first milestone. It's just like find something people will use and pay for. And then when we were getting to that next step, it was like okay, well, let's be thoughtful about this. Like who are Like we have these people that are paying and using something, but like what type of customer do we want? Like where are we finding the more success than not? Where is the sales process easier? Like where can we lean in? And so it was very much just sort of like lean into the different facets. It was trying to like sell bigger deals. It was, what type of functionality do we need in order to, the salesperson, the marketer was buying it because it was booking meetings for the salespeople on the website. But like, how do we get it so that the salespeople are actually using the product and not just like getting meetings? And so and then it started to be this calculus of like, okay, like we have this person buying it, but there's all these other people that could be interfacing with the product that aren't using it, and that could be a lever for us to sell bigger deals and get more engagement. And so it was like, okay, we'll get the marketer, and then how do we get other marketers using it, and then how do we get the head of sales interested in the product, and then all the salespeople using it. And so it was very much like a how do we expand upon this use case that we built.
So then in the beginning, did you have I'm imagining basically you could grow in two ways. So if you were originally selling to already large companies, then you could just grow within the company.
Yep.
Versus if you're selling to smaller companies, then you're like trying to upsell to larger companies. Which route was it, if there was a clear route?
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of just like sell to whoever would buy it in the very early days. And then when we started to get to like $5-10 million in revenue, we had enough data to look at churn and like net retention to see like who is buying more over time. And we sort of realized like there was a very clear segmentation of enterprise was just better for us. Like they would buy bigger deals, they would churn less, they would upgrade more. And so that was when we started to understand like, okay, we can kind of bifurcate the business. And then we built out like an enterprise sales team with enterprise customer success people and enterprise motions built around that. And then separately, there was another part of the business that focused on small, medium, mid-sized companies with its own customer success reps, and like there were different motions. So we sort of like built out different business units within the company to sort of service all of them at the same time.
Okay, that's a lot to serve at the same
It was
time.
it was a lot. And we tried all different versions on the product team. We tried all different versions of like, how do we build for this? Like, do other product teams focused on persona? Other product teams focused on business line? Like, this product team focuses on enterprise, or product teams focused on features. Like, it was just an ongoing experiment over the course of all the years.
Mm. Yeah, I imagine, especially during those first 2 years where you're just trying to like test and find something that works, did the team change a lot? And then, if so, like, how did the founders keep everyone invested in what they were building?
Yeah, team changed a lot. Like even before I joined there, like as I said, we had a couple of years where it was like a try something for 3 months, and there were a lot of periods where like we would pivot to selling a product to product marketers. Then we hired a VP of marketing that was from that industry and knew the customer really well, and then 3 months later we pivoted off of it, and all of a sudden that skill set like wasn't a fit anymore. They weren't excited about it, and so like there was a lot of like self-selecting out of team members, um, where we would make pivots, and some of the team was just like, I signed up to build mobile apps, I'm a mobile app engineer, and now we're not building a mobile app, and I don't want to build it. It's like so there was just kind of this like natural turnover, which for some people, that was kind of like, that's just how this goes. Like, we know that this is what we sign up for. For some other people, they really felt like we were doing too much whiplash. Like, it was a cultural thing, and people sort of had to decide if they wanted to opt into it or not. And there were some people like me that just like opted into that part of the journey. Like, I joined for that. Whereas other people joined for different reasons. They joined for the thing at that point in time, which no longer existed. So yeah, the team changed a lot over those first few years.
Yeah, I imagine it was really helpful that the founders had done this like four times. So they
Yes.
knew to set the right expectations and to not make that whiplash feel like something that's traumatic. It was just normalized.
Yeah, yeah, and like for me, going through it, like I there was a very much a mindset thing where I was kind of like, I'm just here to learn, and so like I'd see the whiplash happen, and I'd be like, what are we doing? Like, why are we whiplashing? And they'd be like, no, Matt, like this is how it works. Like, just chill out, like chill out, and I would just sort of defer to like, okay, like I trust you on that. You know, you've done it before. There's sort of like an implicit trust there.
Yeah, that's so healthy. It's great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's like a really core lesson for I think a lot of the students that are joining startups. I think, we think a job is this like stable thing that our parents did, but like a startup in itself is like just the exact opposite of what our parents did for work, which
Yeah.
is really fun if you understand it and you want it.
Yeah.
But if it's not for you, that's okay. It's great
Yeah.
too. All right, so you took on many roles at Drift, which meant that you could have really done many different things. How did you end up choosing product and growth?
Yeah, so I to the point of like doing a bunch of stuff. My role, like I was hired in as a product manager, but I sort of was, and this was just a function of joining a really early stage startup. Like there was just a lot of stuff that had to happen that someone needed to own, and so it was like the engineers aren't going to own this, and the founders are, they're focused on other things, and like we don't really have a product marketer, so like I guess I'll do that. Like we don't, no one's doing, we don't haven't hired a support person. Like I'll just do the support, and so it was very much to me like the journey of Drift was just sort of like doing product work, but watching the business and just saying like I'll help with this thing. Like I'll try to figure that. I'll own pricing for the next 6 to 8 months. Like I'll just own this thing. Um, and to me, product has sort of always been a like a base where I love the function of product because it's really cross functional. You get to work with everyone at the company, and you get to learn a lot about all the different facets. So like in a product role, you have to learn how to speak to the engineers. So you have to become like at least technically literate, right? Like the designer, you are helping make solutions decisions with the designers, and so like you need a good sense of design and UX. Like you have to make business decisions and you have to work with the sales team. Like I just love the fact that the product role, the problem set is always different and it's always interwoven with the fabric of the whole business. And sort of I've just sort of always stuck with that as like my core thing. But when other stuff's happening, it's like someone needs to do this. Like I'm a product lead at AngelList, but I'm also running our partnership program right now just because like someone's got to do it. It might as well be me.
That's awesome. So speaking of product, let's see. I feel like these two questions are sort of similar, so maybe I'll share them both and you can kind of tackle it in whichever way you'd like. What are the skills and characteristics of a good product manager? And then what's the difference between a good versus great product manager?
Yeah. I think a to be a good product manager, you have to be okay with ambiguity and sort of like thrive in your ability to make sense of how to get to forward progress. Like a really good product person is um, able to create forward progress and momentum in a meaningfully thoughtful, strategic direction. Like that to me is sort of like the base of product management. There are situations where like you have to chase a lot of things down, or you're doing very operational type things, and it's not like it's not this sexy like you sit around and think all day. Like this is not what a product manager does. Like you are in the designs, like you're commenting on the micro copy of these 4 words in this tooltip. Like you are in the weeds on that sort of thing. And so I think in order to be a good product manager, you have to do all those. In order to be a great product manager, I think you have to have like a really deep sense of empathy for the customer and um, a a really good understanding of the market that you exist in and who else is in the market, like what other companies, what are the alternatives that your customers could use, why might they use those, and like where are things heading, and how do you make decisions and prioritize and like create product value in a way that like actually gets you and your business differentiation in a way that is it actually sets you apart in the market.
Yeah, makes sense. So it sounds like the best product managers can create really strong strategies, like really good bets that are well informed by the deep understanding you're talking about and an understanding of the market and the people that they serve.
Yeah.
Great. All right, let's talk about AngelList and your role as a product lead. What is your team working on?
Yeah. My team's working on we maybe it's gonna get a little too complicated, but I'll keep it really high level. Um, my team has built independent software to help funds do their fundraising process. So, like a data room to sell your fund to investors, a digital investor onboarding product to like get them to sign the paperwork, and then a investor portal to get them documents and stuff over the lifetime of the fund. We built these independent products which parallel the existing AngelList offering. So AngelList has been around for almost 10 years, and in its current function has been building tools for fund managers for like 7, 8 years. We have this big stack of software, and basically what my team is doing right now is we are taking that old software because it's very inflexible and it is not going to scale to how we want to build the rest, the rest of the AngelList story. We are going through a process of like taking that, ripping it out, and replacing it with the independent software that my team has built over the last couple of years. Um, and that is tricky. You're flying two planes at once, and you got to like swap them out. It's been fun. Yeah, so that's what my team's working on.
That's awesome. And a great fit for you because of your experience, as an investor. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. Speaking of investing, you've invested in, I guess, over 60 companies now, between the funds you've worked with and then your personal checks, lots of action, lots of
Yeah.
advising. How do you evaluate startups?
Yeah. So I go back to one point I made earlier. Like, founders kind of have to be a little bit psycho. You sort of have to be because it's really hard. And someone was saying the other day, a quote. There's some root to this quote. I don't know who said it, but it's basically like um, startups die when the founders run out of energy. And like really at the end of the day, like, and I think about the drift journey. Like, it was 2 years of what we would look at and say like those things were nonsense. Like, what were we doing at the time? But it was nonsense at the time. But it was just like an experiment that us trying to figure it out. And I think startups are a lot of like, you just need to figure it out, and you need to understand that things will change, and that's okay, and like you need to shift around those changes. There's like a different type of startup, which is like a biotech startup where they're just focusing on like one very specific technical breakthrough, right? And that's just a very different world. But for me, it's I'm investing in pre-seed, seed, when there's not really much. There's not really many customers, not really a product yet. And so to me, it's really about like, who are these founders, and do they have what it takes? Um, and what are they building? And I generally, unless I know the founders already, like I generally like to invest in stuff where uh, if the promise, if like what the founders are promising is built, is there some like meaningful impact on society in like a tangible way? And so I really try to anchor on that. And then there's like the third side, which um, is the market big enough for a like meaningful business to exist, right? Like there are plenty of companies where something could be built and it could be a really great lifestyle business, but it's not a good investment, from a investing perspective, unless you're investing a ton and you're owning a lot of the company. Like the Shark Tank type stuff where like there's physical goods and that sort of world. Um, I am I am looking at like, what is the 5 year of this market? Does the founder have a really interesting perspective on that? And do I just think that the horsepower is high enough to get through the challenges along the way?
Awesome. Um, well, I could ask more about that, but I feel like That's a good overview. So we'll stop there. All right, we have two more questions. The first one is reflecting on your career journey. What do you wish you knew in your teens and 20s, either personal or professional or both, whatever you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah. What do I wish I knew? I wish I knew that I probably should have spent a little bit more time learning technical stuff, like leaning more into technical things. In halfway through college, I tried to add a computer science minor, and I had at the way back, I had played around with HTML and CSS on MySpace pages, and like I had basic understandings, but like I I did not do well in that course. I ended up dropping the minor. Um, but I wish that I had leaned a little bit more into like the technical side of things when I was a little bit younger. Um, and else do I wish I knew? I wish I knew about. This is such a niche thing. I wish I knew about filing 83B uh, with the IRS when you get an equity grant. You should always file an 83B. It matters if the company has some sort of upside. It's like a tax thing. Um, so when you join a startup, file an 83B. Someone told me I should do that, and I didn't listen to them, and I wish that I did. So if you're listening, you should actually listen to me on this one. Yeah, plenty of other stuff too, but those are a couple that come to mind.
Okay, nice. Yeah, just for students on the call, 83B is basically if you file an 83B within a certain period after you have your options, then you are taxed at the value of those options that day versus like when the company IPOs or gets sold when it costs a lot more. So it saves you potentially millions of dollars. Definitely do it.
Yeah.
Okay. And last question. Today, you advise many founders and act as a mentor to many young professionals. Do you currently have mentors who support your own personal and professional goals?
Yeah, funny enough, we'll go full circle with this one. The guy that was the president of the Entrepreneurs Club before me that I joined with that first co-op, he is a mentor to me, and I call him. We talk on the phone all the time. I'm actually getting on a flight to go visit him for a few days right after this. And so yeah, he's been a really good mentor to me, and I think part of like as you get further in your career, part of the mentor mentee type relationship, and uh, ideally you build it over time, like being very transparent is important. Like it's really hard for someone to mentor about a job if you're not sharing things like here's the offer, here's the like equity, here's the like you kind of sort of have to be really transparent, and not only that stuff, but like how are you actually feeling about those things. And I get a lot from him. And then yeah, I mean even the guy that I joined at HubSpot, I joined HubSpot for, he's also still a mentor to me. So yes, I still have him for sure.
That's great. It's awesome that you've kept those long-term relationships. And it's
And
really
I'll
cool that you, yeah,
I'll
go ahead.
add one more. The founders I work with, like I as an advisor, like I do the advising, but like I learn just as much the other way, even if it's not like a mentor relationship. So I learn a lot from the founders in the trenches, like you.
Thanks. I was just going to say, actually, for anyone in the audience, Matt is one of our advisors, and we talk every single week. I tell you everything. You see it all. So that's great. Thanks. All right, we are past time, and you are a very busy person. So we'll end it here. Matt, thank you so much for being generous with your time and wisdom. To everyone here, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you again soon. Thanks so much, y'all. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.